Welcome to Bridging the Bayou, where we will explore what it means to work, live, and play in the Bayou Region. Join us as we take a deeper dive into the people and experiences that make our region such a special place to live and work. On each podcast, we will talk to individuals who are making our region grow and go, who are making strides in uplifting our community. This is a podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. Welcome back to Bridging the Bayou, the podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. I'm your host, Chancellor Kristine Strickland. And joining us today on the podcast is Cohen Guidry, who serves as the Chief Executive Officer for Terrebonne Economic Development Authority. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, look, I know you may not be familiar with our format. I think I sprung that on you, but I'm going to ask you 5 questions in about 5 minutes just to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
I'm going to start off with my first question, which is, you were in the Navy, right?
No, ma'am. I was in the Army.
Okay, y'all. Through my listening audience, I knew that, and so I thought I would try to catch him off guard, which maybe I did. All right, so you served in our military. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
But my question is, how does someone go from serving in the military, and I know you've traveled all around the world, to finding yourself as the Chief Economic Development Officer for Terrebonne Parish?
Well, the military was a long time ago. I was very young when I went in. I was 17 when I went in, and I was probably on a different path in life, and it was probably the best decision I ever made. It gave me a great foundation. I thought that it was going to be tough, and when I got in, I realized that strict parents and Catholic schools prepared me for that for my entire life, and I didn't know it. So it was good structure. It was at a time I was probably no more ready for college at that age than anybody was. So I did college after the military. And it gave great structure, good leadership, taught me a lot of great things. So it set the path forward for pretty much anything that I wanted to do.
Excellent. And so tell us a little bit about that career journey. Where from the military, where did you go next? And again, how did you come to find your way into economic development? It's not, I don't know a lot of people who go into college saying, I'm going to be an economic developer when I grow up.
I did not.
Okay.
I went to college to appease my parents. Both my parents were accountants and CPAs. My older brother's a CPA, so my dad has a CPA firm, and at 87 years old, he still actively works during tax season. And I did it more to appease my parents than anything. I had my GI Bill that I could use, so I did, and I worked while I was going through college. And it kind of bored me because I was stuck in an office, working for them, doing things, and I was looking around at these 4 walls that just felt like they were closing in on me. So I went into oil and gas, started working on a drilling rig. And I said, if you start at the bottom and you work your way up and you know all the positions, you can probably lead people one day. So my focus was always on leading people or making a difference, being able to offer good support. And that's really what leaders do, is they offer support and they let them do the work and they get out of their way. Give guidance and things like that. And I worked my way up the ladder and I was able to work into the office, and I moved into the health, safety, and environmental arena. So people getting, as you well know, you teach some great courses here for linemen and production safety and these things. That's the thing that we didn't have. We didn't have courses back then. We're talking about the early 90s when it was just, you figured out how not to kill people. And it was really tough and it was challenging, but I felt, there was such a great reward by keeping people safe, and you lower the injury rates and you lower the death toll and you lower all those things. So, that tenacity and my ability to do it, I moved into management from that point, but I always had a hand, I had a financial background, and I always had a hand in processes and things such as that. So it kind of grew me through my career. And then I went into private sector in 2003 with a accounting and finance background. We opened a mortgage company, and I did that for about 4 years, and found that very interesting. But I could see the the interest rates and the ceiling getting ready to collapse in about 2004, whenever everything went awry. And I had recruiters contacting me. So in 2006, right after Katrina, the workforce had been blown out of this area, no pun intended. But I had recruiters calling me to go to work for a company as their HSE manager for all their Gulf of Mexico assets. And I went in. It was a small company, and they were in the process of going through an acquisition for a company out of the UK, and I just plugged myself in and started showing that I had more assets than just being a safety guy. And nobody was willing to travel to go, so I went to Angola, West Africa, for a audit that Chevron was doing. We were doing a lot of work for them, so I had to go over and sit for the audit. And I realized the landscape and everything was different, but it wasn't terrible. Nobody was shooting at me or anything else. So when I came back, I went to our vice president of operations, and I said, you have a bird's nest on the ground. They just have no support mechanism there. And he said, well, you're the new West Africa operations manager. Find your relief. So now I had multiple hats to wear. So then as I was going over and visiting frequently, we started getting invites to go into other West Africa countries, that was Angola, Equatorial Guinea, the Congo, Ghana, Nigeria. So I spent about 12 years working in those regions, and some were very challenging and some were safer than others. But I was on one of the last planes coming back into the United States when COVID hit, when they started shutting things down. And then I got forced to work from home. And the company I was with made a decision that they wanted to make a shift, because that's right when wind energy was becoming a really big deal. And they decided to take the $40 million a year that they were spending in West Africa and shift it to the East Coast and move into wind. So we came to some different contractual agreements and severance packages. So, I was early retired, as I called it.
Okay.
And I said I was going to take a year off. And this was after IDA. And I said I want to get some repairs done on my property and my structures and my house and everything like that. So it was one of those deals. And I guess about 7 months into it, I get a call from a guy I know, and he says, I didn't realize you had separated from the company you were with. And I said, no, I have. And he said, are you working? I said, no. He said, are you looking? I said, not real hard. and I wasn't. I truly wasn't. He said, send me a copy of your resume. I said, for what? And he said, just send me a copy of your resume in case I hear of any good gigs coming along. I'll let you know. And I've been friends with him for 30 years. So he submitted my resume, unknown to me, to the board of directors and the board of Terrebonne Economic Development. And I get a call from the chairman of the board, and he said, Mr. Guidry, would like to interview you for a position for the executive director of TEDA. And I said, sir, what's a TEDA? And he said, Terrebonne Economic Development. And I was like, okay. So I went and I sat for the interview, and they asked a lot of questions. I knew a couple members on the board, and they said, look, from the parish president down, we feel that you can hire an economist to come in and do it. But if they don't know the industry, if they don't know the people they're dealing with, if they can't relate to people, it's not a good fit. And you've got 30 years of experience doing all those things. You'll figure this out. So, here we are 2.5 years later. They haven't escorted me out the door yet. So, but every day it's gratifying. I run into people. I've been a resident of Terrebonne Parish for the majority of my life. I've owned a home here for many years. I've just always worked away. Mm-hmm. So getting to give back to a community that raised me and that I've always lived in is very rewarding for me.
And how it's neat how your variety of experiences throughout your life have really kind of led you and prepared you for the role that you're in currently.
And you don't realize that.
No, you don't.
Listen,
along the way.
The good Lord has a roadmap, and it's tattooed on the inside of our foreheads. None of us are brave enough to open it up and look at it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, tell us about a book that's had a significant impact on you or that you really love.
One that was probably introduced to me at a young age, and it goes back to, we talk a lot in our different industry associations, and you do some things with us that we partner up with. And I don't know if you've ever paid attention, but I always say that we have lost the art of mentorship in today's industry. We don't mentor young people. And I've had some of the best mentors. Now, I've had a couple not so good ones, but they taught me good lessons of what not to do, how not to treat people. So seven
The
habits of highly effective
Mm-hmm.
people was one that was introduced to me, when I was, probably 26 years old and being brought in and being groomed to get into a management position. And there's so many things that you go back to and you just remember these different things and it's just ingrained in you.
Yeah, nuggets of information, huh?
Yeah.
Stay with you.
And it's unfortunately my biggest time to read was when I was on an airplane for 18 hours. I didn't sleep well on a plane, so I'd grab a good thick book before I leave, and I'd just sit there. And next thing you know, sir, will be landed in 15 minutes, and I've read most of the book, and I'm like, okay, I haven't slept, so. But
Well, great. That is a good one.
Yeah.
That is a good one, especially for those who want to be in leadership or management. So you talked a minute ago about life lessons. Do you have a life lesson that you've learned along your journey that you wish you would have known a lot earlier?
your parents are not as dumb as you think they are.
That's a good one. All right, children out there, are you listening?
They won't.
No.
I didn't listen to my parents.
Yeah.
My kids didn't listen to me. But it is rewarding when you still have them that you can go back to them and say, you were right. And it's even more rewarding when your own children come back to you and say, just because you didn't think I was listening didn't mean I didn't hear you.
Yeah. Do you have a mentor? Someone out there who's you were talking about mentorship. Anybody you want to call out?
Two gentlemen that really made a big impact on my life besides my father, because if you ever hear me start out a story that says a wise old man told me once upon a time, I'm always referring to my dad. But Mr. Jerry Shanklin, who was the CEO of the first company that I ever worked for in the Gulf of Mexico, and General Hunt Downer. Two guys that really have given me the time that I can still today pick up the phone and call them. And they're always, like, well, hey, kid, how are you doing? And I laugh, I haven't been a kid in a long time, but.
Very good. What do you do to unwind and relax and recharge your batteries when you're not serving as the executive director at TEDA?
I have a shop at my home that the name of the business, it's a kind of a side business called Destructive Tendencies. And it was a hobby shop for many years that somehow has turned into a business, but it's upfitting vehicles. It's playing with Jeeps and four-wheel drives and my own personal. And it started because I have three sons and they all wanted to drive. I've always liked to tinker with vehicles, motorcycles. If it had wheels, I played with it. And it started out because I was a poor, broke soldier and couldn't pay somebody to do it. So I had to figure out how to do it. And then it got into, I just like to upfit vehicles. Well, all of them wanted to drive cool vehicles. So I couldn't afford to, to do all that. So, it blended into that way. And it still supports my bad habits and it's enjoyable. And it's therapeutic. I can get out there and get lost in it and don't have to think a lot about it.
Well, there you go. That's my favorite kind of relaxation too, where mindless activity, where you just kind of can go on autopilot and you don't have to worry about the rest of the world or anything and just be really focused on what you're doing. Yep. Well, let's turn our attention now to talk a little bit about TEDA. So in your role as TEDA, when you think about the initiatives that you have going on and the things that are coming up for our region, what are the things that excite you most about the parish?
I think that the parish is in a really good position, and there's ups and downs financially. I think that we faced a little bit of a downturn with tax collection or tax revenue because there was a spike after Ida that brought in a lot of additional tax revenue. And I guess the adage I use with that is I always, on the financial side, I always advise people never count your overtime because you can't buy a car, you can't buy a house with those funds or counting on those funds. So save that, pay off make big purchases with those, put it in savings and things like that. Well, as a conglomerate, the parish has started to count on that. And now we see ourselves being short on tax revenue, but it will come back. It will level out, but I think there's some great opportunities. I mean, our parish has always relied upon one of the main cornerstones has been oil and gas. Mm-hmm. And I think that, as we refer to that now as energy, because there's multiple types of energies. Terrebonne Parish started out as a fishing community. And then it evolved in the late 1800s where people, said, wait, I can do both. I can work in oil and gas and I can fish on my days off. And it brought a lot of people in this area. But I think that healthcare, I think that manufacturing, I think that aerospace, education. I mean, I drive past this place and remember I grew up in Schriever, so I would drive this way to go to Homa. And this was before this big bridge and highway was right here. I'm dating myself, but this was all cane fields. And you drive past it now, and it's like, it's amazing to me to see that this campus, it's not a vocational technical school. It's a campus. It's a campus for higher learning. I mean, that just excites me because I think the challenges, we've got some outward migration, and I think that at the state level, at the regional level, and local level, you guys are doing it. Nichols is doing it. We're all trying to gather our people to come back here. I left for 4 years. And when I came back to Terrebonne Parish, I said, there's not another place I want to live. Now, I lived in Lafayette for about 3 years because of work, but I always felt warm, loved, and accepted in Terrebonne Parish. So I think that that's some great things. I think that there's some good things. We've got defense contracts for certain shipbuilders in this parish. They're going to make a big expansion. I think that's going to be those guys always seem to have money because they spend our money like it's the defense industry.
Yeah.
So I think a multitude to have 4 good, solid cornerstones for the foundation of our economic welfare in this parish. Everything else you've got to have a high when there's a low for one. We've relied solely on oil fields for a long time, and I think we're expanding on that and getting in different industries, and that's so important to have a stable.
Yeah. So on the four foundational pillars, what do you see those being?
Well, I think healthcare is a big one here. Yeah. Retail's always going to be one. That fills one, and I think oil and gas or energy is one. And I think that our fourth is growing. You can probably key it into technology. Mm-hmm. One of the things I say that Houston has the energy corridor that runs I-10, that runs all the way through Houston out to Katy. That's considered the energy corridor. We have the technology corridor, and if you pick it up at Lumcom and run it all the way up this way, past Fletcher to Nichols, everything in between. We're filling in the pieces with aerospace. I mean, one of your neighbors right here has an aerospace.
That's right.
You guys are well involved with that. I mean, I think that getting more. We have some nice little nuggets, and it's funny because I asked this company that to come on our TV show, and they said, no, I'm sorry, we like to run under the radar. So I won't go into who they are, but I will tell you what they do.
Yeah. So
they started out 3 guys. 2 of them are surgeons, and 2 of them are brothers. One guy does operations, and he ran a machine shop. They invested in it. They're both cardiovascular surgeons, and they were someplace talking with an R&D guy about making their cardiovascular tools. He said, "Well, it's a 2-year lead on them." I said, "We can't. That'll kill our R&D. What's the holdup?" Well, machine shops and qualified people and everything. I said, "Wait a minute. We're owners in a machine shop. This is not, no. We're going to figure it out. You tell us what we need, and we're going to buy the equipment, and we're going to start making them in-house." So I stumbled upon them through what we call a BRE, a Business Retention and Expansion Visit, which we try to do at least 100 per year. And I just love to know how things are made. It's my mechanical brain. So I'm like, I need a tour. I want to see these things. So they had outgrown where they were, and they looked at a couple different facilities. But when they bring in a test team to do R&D, they have to fly in a surgery team. They have to make the parts off of a blueprint, which you have to have a high-power microscope to see these parts. They're tiny. And then you fly a team in. You have to rent a surgical-grade lab, and then you have to get a cadaver, and you got to, all these things. And they said, if we can have one-stop shop to do that, instead of flying teams all over the country to do this, and if there's a problem with that one little part, they scrap the project, for that time versus having their Swiss machine shop right outside the laboratory, and they say, hey, take this much off or fix it this much or modify it this much. They do it while somebody takes a coffee break or goes and grabs lunch and comes back. They're growing that in Terrebonne Parish.
Wow. That for me, the ingenuity of the individuals who live in our region, I think cannot be overstated. It's one of the things, many of our folks know I grew up in Ohio, in North Ohio, lived in South Ohio, moved down, was in New Orleans. But when I moved down here, what I found in this community was individuals who saw a problem, saw a challenge, figured out the solution, and then were able to create businesses. And we have so many in our community that are even generational businesses where dad or grandfather started the business to solve a challenge or an issue that the community was facing or that maybe a business or industry was facing. And our economy has grown around that. And then to see us take even that next step, you mentioned the technology, right? To see us now going to space with some of the technology right here in this parish is something that I think many people don't really have a true appreciation of the work and the types of work that are happening here.
So I tell people who are from outside of this country and outside of the state, you will find the highest level of uneducated geniuses. Because, and I say that with all the pride in the world, because you might have a guy, this generation's dad or grandfather that had no choice. They went to work. They went to the 8th grade or whatever, and they either got on a boat and learned to fish or shrimp patrol, or they went into a shipbuilding, or they went into some industry to help support whatever the reason it was. And they were problem solvers. And I have been fortunate enough to travel to almost every continent on this planet. And I have seen something that was built in South Louisiana that people take all the pride in the world. They say, you've got to come see what you guys built for us. And it's so rewarding. And if you don't have pride when you see that, and smile, when you say, that was built where I come from. Real quick, we have shortly after I came to work for TEDA, I was contacted by a doctor from UL, and he was the head of the solar department. And he said, listen, I've got a company out of Belgium that is developing a use for water lily, water hyacinth. And I said, well, get me on the call. I'd love to hear about this. So I used to fly through Belgium, going through, because they had the most available flights going to any of the West Africa countries. So I'd spend a little time there. So we all get on a call, and they're explaining the process of what they do with these water hyacinths. They're going to capture them, then they're going to solar dry them, use solar power to heat and dry them. Then they're going to cut them, and then they're going to grind them, and they're going to turn them into insulation for the walls. They're going to use them for cat litter. They're going to use them for, instead of going to Home Depot or Lowe's and buying a 2-gallon potted plant in a plastic bucket, they make pot plants out of these things that are fully biodegradable. You dig a hole, drop the whole thing in the ground, cover it up, and you're done, and it will naturally come apart. So as we continue the conversation, I asked him, I said, well, why Terrebonne Parish? Well, we came here, and UL helped us develop the solar-powered drying. They put us in touch with Wildlife and Fisheries, and Wildlife and Fisheries said, if you're going to find the most populated area, heavily populated area of the water hyacinth, go to Terrebonne Parish, because we have the most waterways. And so they did, and they secured a lease out in Bayou Black, but they brought in all this equipment with them. They had this built in Germany, and this built in South Africa, and this. And I said, I can't stop what you guys have already done, but we connect dots, and we help companies with not necessarily financial resources, but knowledge of who to send them to. I said, you guys have literally brought sand to the beach. And they just kind of looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, you have the largest area of fabrication in Terrebonne, Lafourche, and neighboring parishes all over the world. We could have built you off of a napkin, a concept of what you wanted to. You probably would have spent less money. You wouldn't have had to import it. But we'll grow through these things. And it's connecting the right people with the right. That's a big gratifying part of my job, is connecting the right people and seeing something that starts as a concept or an idea to coming into fruition to where it's a full-blown product.
Nice. Yeah. And I have seen that connection, right, up close and personal. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the relationship with Fletcher. And I want to pivot back just a minute to something that you said earlier. You were talking about economics and economic drivers for the region. And you mentioned us, the community college. And I think many people out there don't necessarily always think about community colleges, or sometimes universities, right? Regional. You hear people talk about a college town and the impact of a university. But I'd love to hear from you your thoughts around how Fletcher is an economic contributor or economic driver for the region.
It's a huge driver. I will tell you this. I go back to when I was, because I've got friends in the school system that whenever I came into the position, they say, please come speak to my class. And I did. And I realized I was speaking to 11th and 12th graders and realized I should be speaking to 8th graders or even earlier. But I cannot tell you, I can tell you who most of my teachers growing up from grade school were. The nuns, and then transition into Vanderbilt and then H.L. Bourgeois. But I can't tell you one guidance counselor because I probably never spoke with them. Mm-hmm. They never had a career path. They didn't structure it to say, okay, well, maybe you're not going to go to a 4-year university. And you look in this region, what do we need? I think you guys do a phenomenal job. I mean, because Kristine, truthfully, I've been talking with companies that want to come here and say, okay, we're going to have a lot of automation. Okay. I know somebody who's right across the highway from you that can put a curriculum together. And I've picked up the phone and I've called you and said, hey, can you? And you're like, absolutely. And spit one out in no time. Multiple times over and over and over. Can you help me? And the answer is always yes. Yeah. You may not have it on the shelf, but you set out and develop it. And to me, that shows the commitment of this school and you and your staff. You guys care. You want to make this a better place. And everybody's not going to use a 4-year degree. And people just need to have a talk with. And unfortunately, parents, they foot the bill for a lot of the education. And unfortunately, kids are interested in different things. And they won't realize it till later in life. But not everybody's built that they're going to go to a 4-year university or go to higher than that. And if they would be real with themselves and say, I can make a really good wage doing this. I mean, plumbing, electrical, all the things that build in a house, all the things that build in a building, and they're so needed. Real quick, I go back. I had the privilege of working with this lady in my last career. And she laughed because she told me that her father, so north of Houston, they owned a couple hundred acres on a farm. And there were 3 partners. One was a body guy, body repair for automobiles. One was a plumber, and one was a doctor. And the body repair guy had a very successful business. The body repair guy and the plumber always had their annual dues up front and ready. The doctor was always scrambling and moving and struggling and everything like that. So the old adage is, attorneys and doctors make all the money in the world. I don't know if that's always the case. Not for, for every one of them.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I think our HVAC people, our air conditioning students make a pretty good amount of money in South Louisiana. That's for sure.
Well, being from Ohio, that it's not, I've got a lot of family in Montana. There's a lot of new houses that are built that don't have air conditioning. Mm-hmm. It's a necessity here. It's a luxury there. I bet you every one of them has a heater.
I'll bet. Yeah, for sure. And, that whole point, as I was reflecting on some of the things you were talking about in your own experience, what community and technical college education might have been for you. You talked about having a mechanical brain, right? Your experience in oil and gas and the training that you needed to be able to really be successful, even in the health and safety sector. Those are all things that we do here. And I tell people, if you have a child at home and they want to be outside and working on the car, Or they're the kid sitting in the classroom and they're taking apart the mechanical pencil and putting it back together. Those are the students that we need to be, tracking them and putting in front of them these career opportunities. I always share the story about a friend of mine who had done all of the things, right? Went to the university, got an accounting degree, went on, was working on an MBA, but was always in the garage tinkering with cars. And eventually called and just said, I can't sit behind a computer and stare at numbers and spreadsheets anymore. I want to be outside. I want to be working with my hands. And came over and did our line worker program and as happy as can be, right?
Yeah.
But it's getting the individual and what they want to do in line with the training and the education that they need. And that's, I think something we do really well here.
I think that, and the further we get away from when I was in high school to now, there was a stigma put on VOTEC, and it did us more harm than good. And it's an evolution.
Yeah.
From the way we think, think about it. All of our parents were like, "Got to go to college, got to go to college, got to go." And I was you've got two career paths. You're either going to college or in the military. Is what I told all three of my sons. And none of the three did either of those. They went to work. But you have to influence them. You have to encourage them. You haven't, the time to tell them, well, you better figure it out is not in the 8th grade or when they graduate. Yeah. And I get looked at pretty funny a lot of times when people ask me about the current state of skilled labor and people not wanting to go into the workforce and kids, how do we have such a lack of it? And there's some good statistical data out there. But another part of it is if some parents would give their kids luggage for graduation and not let them live in their basement playing video games till they're 26 and still on their insurance, we might have a little bit better place. People look at me like I have 3 eyes when I say that, but it's the truth. I mean, it really is. We have to encourage them, make them cut the grass, make them take the trash out, little chores, and you reward them for those things. And hard work never killed any of us.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I want to kind of go back to again that you just said that I think is part of the myth, right, that we have maybe told our children or we've said in the community, and it's just kind of become this reality, is that there is an either or. And there really is not. It doesn't have to be military or college. It doesn't have to be university or community college. We take now students, we have a number of veterans who enroll here. We have a very large veteran population here at Fletcher. And we have now matured to the point, both here at Fletcher and I think within the community colleges around the nation, where we recognize what you learned in the military. So we are able to say, what job did you do while you were in service to our country? Okay, you were an automotive technician. What grade did you get to? Were you a E6 or an E7? That tells us how many years and sort of the skill set that you had and what you knew. And we're able now to equate that and translate it into academic college credit so that you don't have to start from zero when you know a whole lot. And so we're able to, you can go into the military, but then come out and go do something else. And even with the university, I love it when I hear the story of our technical students who say maybe they're an HVAC or maybe they're an auto mechanic, and they get to the point where they say, you know what, I want to open my own business. I want to go into business for myself. Mm-hmm. I've been working for somebody else. They go on to the university to get that business degree, to learn how to maybe do accounting or how to do marketing and learn those skills. So we've entered this realm where it's really where you're at in the journey and what education meets you where you need for the job that you're in, but knowing that there are these additional pathways to always come back to continue to kind of, gain more expertise in that area. And to me, that's the beauty of what we do in education and the beauty that we have all of that right here in our region.
I will share this with you. I attended your chancellor's breakfast, and that young lady, there wasn't many dry eyes in that crowd that got up and told her story. Yeah. That was phenomenal. And you think about that over and over. Somebody who, for various reasons, had to take care of the family, early pregnancy, any of those things that they don't end your life, but they stunt the growth of it right then. they slow it down. And they have the courage to walk back through these doors, and you grab them and hug them and let them know, because that's what the story that she told. And that's the story I've heard multiple times about this place, is that, it's the same reason people come to this area and stay here, because they feel warm and loved. It's the community that we have, and it's just what we do here. And you guys take that to the next level. And I don't think it was scripted at all. That was her own heartfelt words, because I've heard those things over and over and over. And you have to applaud their courage to be able to say, okay, I'm later in life, but I'm going back at it. And you guys take them and make something out of them.
Yeah. We are very fortunate that we get to do that work. And along those lines, right, we are very committed to developing a workforce for this region. And you talked about challenges. I know that is one of the challenges, because we've had that conversation sort of over and over. You're trying to entice new business into the region. You're also trying to retain businesses here. And workforce seems to continue to be a challenge. Do you all have strategies? I know, again, we're partnering on some things, but what do you see as the future needs of the workforce when you're talking to business and industry that you're trying to recruit to the region?
The shipbuilding industry in Terrebonne Parish is a really big one. I know you guys are working closely with the large manufacturing machine shops. I mean, you guys I see your signs outside of their new buildings and facilities in this town. So those partnerships that you guys are working with them. And then your Thibodeau campus that has the welding and those things. I mean, I think that's a fantastic process that you guys are doing. We work closely with LED's group as far as the skilled workers and those different programs, and trying to get people into the workforce, trying to help, and it's connecting those dots. But there's a bigger need than the people. There's more empty seats than we have butts to put in them.
Yeah. So you mentioned LED. And I know in the economic development world, there are a lot of, what do we call them, acronyms, I guess, or shortened up words, right?
Yes.
So we talked about TEDA being the Terrebonne Economic Development Authority,
Right.
Louisiana Economic Development. We have South Louisiana Economic Council. For everyone who's out there, who are these groups? How are you related? What's funny because
relationship on day one, which would have been June or July of 22, I realized I knew a lot of acronyms from military and energy and everything, and I had to learn a lot of new ones.
Okay.
So, and I'm sorry, I'm getting more and more used to it. That Louisiana Economic Development is a state level. They are tied in very closely. They work directly for the governor. They have Governor Landry came in and. I'm not sure if cleaned houses. There's a lot of people that left when he came in. He brought in a new director and a lot of new staff, and he was not bashful about saying that he wanted government to run at the pace of business, and that's the only way we were going to be successful and compete with other states about bringing companies in. And look, companies want to go and build somewhere. What's the incentive? What do they get the most bang for their buck? Where do they get a skilled labor force? This area, I mean, we're on calls all the time, ROI call, return on investment of companies. So there's when you look out there, there's site selectors that's their business. They go out and recruit companies, and then they'll go to LED and they'll say, hey, they're looking for 50 acres. They want existing buildings. They want this much water. They want this much electricity. Send it out to all your regions. And in the state, there are 8 regions. We're in the Bayou Region. Our regional is South Louisiana Economic Council. They've had a facelift, that, and I'm fortunate enough to have known the executive director prior to taking over there, and gave my commitment that when I came there was an existence of a regional, but there was really no function. And when I found out they were going there, I said, I've got your back on this one. We're going to make this successful, and we're going to make this, we're always compared to the GNO Incs., to the LEDAs and things like that. And maybe we're a little far behind them, but we're going to get there. We're going to gain momentum, and we're going to grow this thing as a team. And the thing is we interact in so many different areas that, think about all the different functions you and I run across each other. SCIA and chamber and select functions and all these different things. But we all interact and we all are working together and working as one team. And that's what we have to have. We have to have a unified front before anybody's going to look at us and say, whoa, would you look at them? Mm-hmm. Because they haven't. We've worked and operated in different silos. And Louisiana Economic Development did a lot of that same stuff. So I think the governor was spot on when he changed the head of it and gave her the authority to bring in the team players that she did, and they all came from private sector. So I think they've got the knowledge of what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. Now they're in a position that they can make those things happen. And there's, I can tell you in my first year and a half with Terrebonne Economic, I met very few people with LED. And, the funny thing is there's something about being prior service. When you recognize or meet somebody that was prior service, it's just, it goes away. And I'll tell you a story. I went through Leadership Terrebonne in 2023 with some members from your staff, and we went to Government Day. The former governor, Governor Edwards, John Bell Edwards, was a company commander at 2nd Battalion, 502nd, the 82nd Airborne. I served at 1st Battalion, and he happened to see a lapel pin that I was wearing when we were there on the day. And I walked around and shook his hand. I said, I understand you're a fellow infantryman. And one of your staff members snapped a picture. And she told me afterwards, she said, I didn't see a governor and an executive from Terrebonne Economic talking. I saw two old soldiers that would just sit in there reminiscing and talking and catching up. And that's pretty common wherever you go. And there were some members of LED that I found out that were, and I tried to approach them at different things, and they were just unapproachable. And I found that it's sad that they weren't, that you throw up a wall. But this new staff, they are so available. You could only get in the old group, you could only get office numbers. I've got every one of them cell numbers, and you can call them at any time, and they answer emails at night and on the weekends. That's kind of the workforce I was used to. I was on 24-hour calls 7 days a week for 30 years. And when someone calls me after 5 now, like, man, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. And I'm like, I answer the phone at 2 a.m. the same way I do at 5 p.m. or 6 o'clock in the morning. So that work ethic is important to be successful in what we do.
Well, and it's obviously paying off, right? You've had some really major announcements coming out of LED.
Absolutely.
New economics, companies, business, and industry coming into the state. And there seems to be this sense that there's some momentum building and that there's some really good things to come. So with that, and I know maybe you can't talk about some things, but is there any projects that are on the horizon that you're excited about, that we could get excited about for our parish?
There are. I will back up just a minute. We all want. I want to look after Terrebonne Parish first, but that doesn't mean that I can't have teammates and have a win or a success story because they go to one of our regional parishes. One of the 4 that's in this region, and we have to be able to look at, is it a win if it comes to Louisiana? It's never been. It has to. The economic drivers, and we run models on if a dollar is spent in Terrebonne Parish, how many times it turns over before it leaves the parish. So you kind of get a feel for how many places it touches and it feels. You think about on payday, do you go out and eat, or do you go buy a car, or do you go car, whatever it is, we're all spending money in the community. So we have to kind of change our mindset of, well, if we don't want Lafourche to get it. Well, it's not our choice, and it's not Lafourche's choice. If that company says they gave me a better incentive, or we want to be there for this reason, we should celebrate those successes with our partners at the regional level. We have calls with companies, with these site selectors that they want to bring companies in or at least offer a piece. I get on every one of those calls, and I try to be the best salesman for Terrebonne Parish. I want it here.
Right.
But if it doesn't come here, I can't not be happy for our partners someplace. If they come to Louisiana, it's a win. If they come to the region, it's a win. But companies want, of course, first thing out of the box, they want it. I need you to sign this NDA. I don't want to talk about it. And some people, I want to know all the facts. You don't get to know all the facts, but I can tell you a little bit about it. We've got a state-of-the-art shipbuilding facility that the state has invested money in. The privately owned company is going to match dollar for dollar. It's a $44 million, well, all in it's $88 million to build a state-of-the-art facility that will compete with Florida, will compete with Alabama, will compete with Mississippi, and we've never been able to do that before.
Yeah.
So
that's exciting.
That is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about, I had a meeting with a company the other day, and they came in and they said, we're from a neighboring parish and we want to move. We said, well, bad for them, but good for us. But how can we help? Well, what can you do for us? What kind of incentives? And I said, can I give you a little? I was talking with their CPA and their controller, and I said, let me give you a little advice. You don't just walk in asking. Let's talk about what do you bring? Well, we're going to bring employees here. Okay, and we're going to build a new facility. Where are you going to buy all your materials? Are you going to farm it out to outside of the parish? You want the parish to give you something, an incentive to make you want to move here. Well, let's talk about, how do you spend those dollars? Cement is $120 a yard now. To build your facility, that's going to take a lot of cement. Why don't you get with some of these locally owned cement companies? Because you're putting money back in. If you would give a commitment for building materials and those kind of things and local, give them a shot. If they don't meet, the price you're looking for, then it's all fair game. But start spending some money here to try to stimulate the economy as much as you can, and then you come and ask, "I've done this. What will you do for me?" So it's some of those conversations, but it's having them on the front side. But it's also important to meet with them because we get businesses sent to us from multiple avenues. Some may come through LED. Some may call because they just picked up the phone. Might come through the Chamber of Commerce. You just never know. There's multiple vehicles that carry a vehicle or multiple vehicles that carry a business to us. Whether it be a small business that just wants to start up or expand or move in here or what have you. And as long as we get in there and we start, we go down the checklist first and say, well, what do you do and how do you do it? And what are the incentive plans out there that we can plug you into? Mm-hmm. We plug you in at the state, we plug you in at regional, we plug you in at these different places. There's a training program that Fletcher can offer that could help you get qualified employees. Let's get you lined up with the right people, and we get you lined up for success on the front side versus you spending this money kind of like our Belgium company that brought in all this equipment that, unfortunately, they're not going to use. Yeah. They're going to go and modify it. And let's build you one from scratch, and let's work with some of the other local companies that can do this for you off of a napkin. Yeah. So it's we don't have all the answers, but we've got more than somebody who walks into this parish and has never worked here before. We know the people to help you team up with or partner with.
And there are intricacies to bringing companies in. I mean, you've mentioned so many of them, from the onset of just the initial relationship building and the building of the trust, right, to all the way to that business opening. And I think one of the things I hope that our listening audience walks away with today is it's not as simple, I think, as some folks think. Like, I would imagine some people said when they heard, Meta was announced up in the northern part of the state, they said, hey, Cohen, why don't you pick up the phone and call, whoever owns Meta these days, right? Yeah. And tell them to come to Terrebonne Parish. But it's not that easy. It's a multi-step process.
It very much is.
And you have to have a system in place to do that. So,
and with that comes, other states. I was at a seminar early December, and LED had a big part in it. Right after the tax changes were coming out, and that a lot of people are nervous about it. But I think that the team that Governor Landry put together to put those in place, they didn't, because I've met with some of these economists and some of these people doing the studies and the tax law and everything, and had a lot of discussion with the wise old man that I referred to earlier. And it's going to be a win. It certainly is going to be. It won't feel like that at first to certain people. Not everything is perfect to for everybody, but it's going to be as an entire state. It's going to be a win for Louisiana because it'll allow us to be competitive. And I'll give you a good example. So if Louisiana Economic Development had 20 programs out there, and they had one pot of money that they had divided amongst those 20 programs. They're doing away with several of the programs, a lot of the programs, and they're putting it into several major buckets because those major buckets will give recruiting dollars, closing dollars. As a company wants to come here and they say, look, perfect site, perfect location, perfect this, but what do how are you going to help us out? It's going to take more than an industrial tax exemption for those companies to do it. Then the state can say, well, here's what we can offer you. So 2022, LED put out the LA Competes some monies. They put out $8 million for the whole state. Well, there's 8 economic districts in the entire state, or region, excuse me. So each region got $1 million. Well, some of these regions have 12 parishes. We fortunately are smaller. We have 4 parishes, so that's easy math, $250,000 per. And it went to building infrastructure inside of for a project, but there were some strict guidelines. And we just this week have gotten the final stuff across the line, and we've got to get a few more pieces to LED. But we're going to have Terrebonne will have the first project to be able to use that $250,000 for an infrastructure project that we need. And it's going to help. It's going to open up multiple acres to be usable by commerce and retail and things like that, was just dead property before because maybe it didn't have a 16-inch water line going in front of it, and it didn't have sewer, and it didn't. So you're not going to talk to a large convenience store that's national chain to say, hey, we're going to come up and open right here, or a restaurant on the other side. Yeah. So it's something that $250,000 went towards a grant that was $3.2 million that's going to make that whole area, the value of that property go up, and all those dollars turn over and stay inside the parish for the most part, and they're usable.
Wow, congratulations on that. That's a big win for the parish.
Well, I think it's something that needed to happen. So in that conference, they were explaining that Louisiana put up $8 million. The closest coastal state next to us was Alabama, and they put up $32 million. And that's what the state noticed whenever they're going through all this and doing the comparisons and everything else. There's a lot of states that are pumping a lot of money into these programs, and so they want to fill up that pot to be able to do better things for the community. They're making those communities business ready.
Yeah, they're investments in the future, and they bring other dollars to the community.
Well, we've got a program, and right across the street is the largest, but it's called Certified Sites. So you take a piece of property and you say, we've got let's take this, because what a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't realize it, is if I want to come in and buy a piece of property to put a business on, from start to finish, everything you have to go through to make it shovel ready takes about a year. You got environmental studies. You've got all these different things that you have to do. Well, the Certified Site program does everything on the front side. And if you get into the program, LED will put up X amount of percent. Those are there's rumors they may change, so I don't want to throw numbers out there, but they put up a nice piece. And if you're in a certain electrical service provider's area, they help with it. And then the landowner says, okay, well, I've got to pitch in 25% of whatever it may be. So let's say it's $10,000 to do all the stuff that needs to be done. Well, they get to $2,500. They get their site certified. It goes on LED's Louisiana Economic Development site, and when site recruiters or site selectors are going out and looking, they're not talking to anybody. They're seeing this website on the state level, look at all these pieces of property that are certified sites. So we had two. That was Rebecca North and South. That's about 1,000 acres. We just got a 44-acre piece at the Port of Terrebonne certified, got across the line right before the end of 2024. We've got two in the pipeline. So that's on part of our goals and objectives on how we operate. We've got two more pieces that we want to put into the pipeline to get on that. And then we want to start building the pipeline. Well, I want to see two pieces added in each year. And the process is a year to 18 months to have a piece site certified. But I think it gives us a competitive edge when people are out there and they're looking. But even across the street, there's no water. There's a water line running across the front of the highway, but there's no streets built in. So some of those programs may qualify to do even more infrastructure, a business park, the next level up. I mean, and with Valhalla extension coming all the way out, and it's going to come out right across the street. We're involved with DOTD, state police, local planning, and everything else of what we're going to do because I've heard you say more than once, and if we get out of here at 4 o'clock, it's going to be challenging if you're not going to Thibodeau to get out of here. So
this is a busy area now.
And we have to help. I mean, people think, it's the funniest thing, the first 6 months of being in this position, people, you're with TEDA, you got free money. No, we don't have any money, but we can help you find it. But there's so many pieces that we're involved in because, we went through a BRE we did with one of your neighbors. Rouse's corporate headquarters is right next door. And we said, well, what are some of your pain points? I said, well, 18-wheeler trying to turn in here or turn out of here. It gets a little tricky sometimes depending on the time of the day. What can we do? So we started a traffic study. Unfortunately, DOT works a little slower than what we do. But it's all those things that make it possible. If you're going to build a business park, you got to go back to look at traffic. You got to go look at parking. You got to look at watershed. You got to look. There's so many people that are involved in something to take a raw piece of land and make it into something. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen at the flip of a switch or a snap of a finger.
Yeah, it's really, really a lot of different pieces, parts that you're trying to keep a hold of and move forward and do all of those things.
I call it juggling chainsaws.
Okay. That sounds dangerous.
It's challenging.
Yeah. Well, I want to also got one final question just about TEDA. So talk to us about one of your big successes in this past year. What are you most proud of that you all have accomplished, maybe in the past year or so, that you'd like to share?
Well, I think that when I came in, our board was it was a bit dysfunctional. Our board's made up, when they brought. And it was a state-formed authority. It was put in place, bylaws, and the parish had to help put it in place. They looked at all the aspects of what's going to make this a core group and tie it all together. So we've got 3 board members from SCIA, local industrial group, 3 from the Chamber of Commerce, and these are pulled from their members. 2 from the parish council and 1 appointment from the parish president. But deeper in our bylaws, they have to be, you want to talk about shrink a pool of people, so they have to be a business owner or an executive with that. So vice president or above, vice president, president, CEO, general manager, owner. Well, that just takes your audience and shrinks it down. But finding the right 9 people that work together. So I have changed 8 of the 9 board members since I've come on. Which, if you work with the board, you realize that can be very challenging because it's I think in the past they were kind of just thrown people that maybe weren't the right fit, and because they owned a business, well, what business is it? Well, he's a DJ. That's not the business that wants to drive this parish. Nothing taken away from a DJ, but technically it's owning a business. But we want decision makers. We want people who have their pulse on everyday business, and we have. So when a position opens, we'll get the chairman on the board and we'll get some other members and we'll say, okay, who do we want to bring into this realm? We've got industry covered, and we've got banking covered, and we want to make sure we have a nice. You have to have retail in there because you got to have a finger on a pulse of what you're seeing in your ups and downs and things like that. So it's building that right mix of people. So I would say getting the board in place finally, it was a long challenge, but we have 9 of the brightest stars in the parish putting things together. And I see it in the success. We have not done, TEDA had not done a board retreat since 2016. You helped us with our very first one almost mid last year. And we said, look, we got a late start. Let's get another one in there. And I saw more interaction at our last one in December, more people asking those tough questions that all rest on my shoulders, challenges and all those things. And I love challenges. And I do. And I was able to take the lull in the time between Christmas and New Year's and do a lot of statistical analysis and figuring out, are we doing all we can do in these areas? And some of those answers are no. Some of those answers are no. We are not putting out the level of work. So when you talk about what am I thankful for, I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for you pushing me at times when you think I might be mad, but I'm listening. But my board pushing me, my board asking the right questions because they're going to help me grow professionally. They're going to help me look, because a lot of this we're learning together. We don't know what we don't know, and there's things that are in place in Terrebonne Parish that have never been used. TIF, tax increment financing, and that's there's a whole book of laws on that we're gonna start looking at what we can do in there. It's been on the books since 2009 and never used. So that's a challenge for this coming year or maybe 2026. So I didn't land at Amazon, unfortunately. We were in discussions with them, and I mean we didn't have, but the parish as a whole had the purchase agreement on the table, and they run a model just like Costco, just like Sam's, and population and traffic count is a big piece of their model before they're going to go invest a lot of these dollars. And they felt that they could support our area from the center out of New Orleans, out of Lafayette, and until our population, because we've had an outward migration. So until our population, until you and I can bring all these people back into Terrebonne Parish, and I think they would come back.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
I wanted to land them, but
yeah. Well, and I'll just say, I thank you for allowing me to spend time with your board and at that board retreat. And I would 100% agree with you. I think that the 9 individuals who are in that room really care deeply about our parish, care deeply about the economic future of our region. And so I agree with you. I think you have the right people at the table. And we're very lucky to have a leader like you implementing everything on a day-to-day. So
a lot of trust.
There you go. So I have just a couple more questions. So I usually try to wrap it back around with some other get-to-know-you personal questions. So you took one of my things because I was going to talk to you a little bit about the cars.
Okay.
But I am going to ask you, what's the coolest car upgrade you've ever done?
As a personal project, when I was deployed to Iraq, I had an old piece of junk, 1979. Now, mind you, this was 1990. 1979 Jeep CJ5. And look, it had bald tires, no top, but I drove that thing all over Fort Bragg and Fort Hood, Texas. I'd throw a garbage bag over the seat because it was all ripped up, and if it rained, my hind end got wet. My parents took the year that I was deployed to bring it back to Houma, and that was their therapy, and it kept them sane, and they redid it. They redid the body, they redid the interior, they gave it a whole new look, and we may or may not have commandeered a Humvee. There was a single payphone on Tapline Highway, which is the highway leading from Saudi Arabia into Iraq, and we may or may not have commandeered a Humvee, and I was a squad leader at the time, and I took my 3 guys in my squad, and we found this phone booth. and got to call home. And we had been in country for probably 4 months, and we hadn't been able to have any communications with our family. And the collect call between my parents and my then wife was about $1,000 between the two. So back then, it was really expensive. But so they dubbed the Jeep Desert Fox. Oh. So later, when I was going to Nichols, I had a stack of parking tickets about this because I always take early classes, and if no parking spots were available, I could drive in and straddle a ditch and pull over it. I was out of everybody's way, but they didn't have the same sense of humor. And unfortunately, later on in life, it wasn't practical, and I didn't have the money to keep it and get another vehicle, so I had to sell it. So 2015, I was an avid motorcycle rider, and my father was he was at the house, and I said, I'm thinking about building another Jeep, and I said, I'm a Desert Fox too. I said, but this one's going to be completely different. He says, I think it's a great idea, but I'm not paying for this one. So I sold bike number 47 and 48, and I completely got off of motorcycles. I took that money and invested in this. So it's a four-door Jeep with a Corvette motor. It's an LS3, wow. 6-speed transmission, big axles, big tires. It's really fun. And I don't drive it near enough, but that's one of my prouder ones. That was a 5-year project. But
wow, that's cool. Yeah. Very cool. I'd like to see it sometime. And did you get the parking? You took care of the parking tickets, right? I don't have to call President Clune for you, do I?
All okay. Away.
All right. President Clune, he is all clear on parking tickets. He can come to campus. The other thing is that I know that we both have a shared love of Key West.
We do.
And so have to ask, do you have a favorite watering hole on the island?
Blue Heaven. We enjoyed... thank you so much. Everybody out there doesn't know that I just celebrated my 2-year wedding anniversary. And we're going there. Thank you. Going there on our honeymoon. And the joke was always, my wife was always, she'd loved Key West. She'd been there multiple times. And I had never been. And I jokingly told her, I said, well, you know what? If you ever ask me to marry you, I'll take you there on a honeymoon. And she asked me, so I had to take her. But we stayed a block off of Duval. And just rented a little scooter, and we'd go there every morning while we were there for brunch. And if the listening public hasn't been and you want to go, it's great. Yeah. And then I always say that Duval is Bourbon Street without the smell of sin. Yeah. And it's really nice.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah. And lots of chickens.
Yeah.
To
see the little roosters running around is really cool.
Yeah.
Reminded me of being back in West Africa.
There you go. Well, look, we always like to end with if you have a piece of advice for those who are out there listening or watching the podcast today, something that you would like to share with them is just a word of advice from you. What would that be?
Well, 2 pieces.
Okay.
I have
bonus.
I have one for the young people, and I have one for the others. Young people, your parents are not the dumbest people you're ever going to meet. Listen to them. They've gone through the difficult trials and tribulations in life, and they should know what they're talking about by this time. And one day you're going to realize that they're pretty smart. The other is there should never be an obstacle. You should find a way around it, under it, over it, or even through it.
Awesome. Yeah. Great advice. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
If people want more information about TEDA, where can they find it?
We have a website.
Okay.
It's you can just type in TEDA, and your Google search, we have enough of it, should be there, but it's TEDA.org.
TEDA.org.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you, Cohen, for joining us today. Everyone, this has been the Fletcher Technical Community College podcast, Bridging the Bayou. And please be sure to like us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening to Bridging the Bayou, the podcast of Fletcher Technical Community College. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.